You're listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast brought to you by Nottinghamshire Live.
Hello and welcome to Garibaldi Red, the Nottingham Forest podcast on Nottinghamshire Live. My name is Matt Davis, hosting as usual, and as it's an international break, we're as usual joined by a former Reds player or manager, and this week delighted to be joined by one of the Miracle Men and the League Champions European Cup winners in Colin Barrett. Colin, hello, you well?
Yeah, fine, Matt. You?
Yeah, good. Not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. You were away last week. Did you have a nice holiday?
Yeah, well, we just went up to the northeast to see my daughter up there for a few days and cut a hedge for her, as fathers do, sort of thing, and then came back home. So I was only away a couple of days.
What are you up to these days? Obviously, you were a painter and decorator. Are you still doing that, or have you hung all that up and now fully retired?
I retired some years ago, Matt. I was on a job up a gable end once, and I thought, what am I doing up this gable end when the wind was howling in a gale? And I thought, no, I'm getting down off the ladder, and that was it. Hung the paintbrushes up, as they say.
I think you're still in and around Nottingham, aren't you? I mean, do people still? I guess people recognise you more these days after I Believe in Miracles than maybe they did 10 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure that really did help. Keep it going, if you know what I mean. Keep the fame going. And so, get stopped every now and again. Said it was a good film, brilliant film. So, it really has helped me personally, anyway.
You're a native of the Northwest more than the East Midlands. What was your kind of journey into football? Obviously, Forest signed you from Man City. Did you come through the youth system there, or stumble into it a different way?
Well, it's slightly different, Matt. My father wanted me to have a trade, so he said, "There's no way you're going to be playing football. I want you to have a trade." And at 15, I went to work for Hawker Siddeley Aviation in Woodford there, and I became an aircraft fitter, or aircraft engineer is the correct term. I had a 5-year apprenticeship, and after 2 or 3 years, I'm playing local football, playing youth level at local football, and also senior level at local football. Man City came in and they said they wanted to sign me, so me and my dad went to see Joe Mercer, the manager at Man City, and he said, "We want to sign your lad." So my dad said, "How much are you going to pay him?" So they told me, and they said, "Okay." My dad said, "Sign." I said, "Are you sure, Dad?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, sign." He said, "If somebody's daft enough to pay you 4 weeks' wages for 1 week's work, I advise you to sign." He said, but then after I walked out of the office, he said, "On your own head be it now, because you know my views. I want you to have a trade. You've wasted 2.5 years in this apprenticeship, but it's on your own now, and don't come crying to me if things go wrong." Luckily for me, they all went right. So as history has proven, so happy I made that decision.
What point did your dad say you'd made the right decision then? Did you have to be in the Man City first team before?
He never admitted that, it was the right decision, because, he followed me, don't get me wrong, but his belief was that football was a short life, and that by having a trade, you would have a job, if you like, for longer than football would give you. Admittedly, the money-wise wasn't that vastly different, way out of proportion to the average man. So in terms of a footballing lifespan, put it this way, when I finished at 29, I still had my mortgages, I still had debts to pay, I still had bills to pay. So, got rid of my mortgage about 10 years ago. So I was still paying a mortgage. So the money that we were on, if that's all you're interested in, wasn't great in terms of being secure for the rest of your life. But as I always wanted to be a footballer, and I found out that it was the right decision. And I always said to anybody that asked at the time, and even my dad, I said, "When I finish, Dad, I'll worry about that then." I didn't want it to finish as early as it did, but I finished then.
Were you one of the best kids on the park growing up then, or were you someone who had to work hard to get where well, everyone works hard, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I tell myself that there were better players than me around with the kids at school. Well, I tell the story that I went to a trial for Stockport schoolboys. They asked 6 of the lads from my school to go to this trial. And we all agreed that we would meet up outside a pub where I was brought up, Farmers Arms in Cheadle Heath in Stockport, where I was brought up. And we all said we'd meet there, get on the bus. Because in those days, your mum and dad didn't go with you. No cars, to drive you to a trial match. You had to get there on your own. And at the bus stop, I was the only one there. So I had a decision to make. Do I get on the bus and go to the trial? Or do I go home and just say, nah, none of my mates were there? And so I didn't go. So I jumped on the bus and I made Stockport schoolboys. But I know for a fact there were far better players than me playing in the school.
When you get to Man City then, I think he was kind of starstruck in a way. They're a massive club then with really famous names. What was it like trying to kind of blend into that dressing room, never mind getting to the team?
Well, there was 2 dressing rooms. There was the reserve dressing room and the youth team dressing room, and then there was obviously the first team dressing room. So yeah, I was in the reserve team dressing room. First day training, basically it was an hour long, and I thought 2 hours maximum, and then my day was done. And I found it more difficult to go home then, with the rest of the day with nothing to do, basically. But in terms of being there with all those stars, we all mingled in together through training. And then, you have football matches between each other and all sorts of things. And then you move on, if you know what I mean. You move up the system. And then eventually you get, you change dressing rooms. And when you change dressing rooms, you've got a chance. And luckily for me, I changed dressing rooms maybe a year after I signed. So I signed at 17, 17/18. So, I didn't go through the apprentice scenario at City. So I went into the first team dressing room, and then you just felt part of it. Although you were only the youngster, you didn't have the experience of everybody else. So you were pretty quiet to start off with. So
you're in that first team dressing room. How would you sum up your time at City? I mean, from what I've read, you were never quite a regular, but you were always in and around the squad. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I got into the side and thought everything was hunky-dory. I thought I'd be in for forever. But obviously form dictates that. And form or injury. And we formed it, and I went in and out of the side. New managers came. I mean, we had a lot of managers at Man City, never mind what they have at Forest, but we had a lot of managers then. Joe Mercer was the first manager, and Malcolm Allison was his assistant. Then Malcolm became manager. And then from then on, it was Tony Boak, Johnny Hart, various other people came in, Ron Saunders. And then in the end, I was in and out of the side. So basically, I was in the reserves. And I asked, it got to a stage where I said, I've got to have a transfer, I've got to move for me to progress in football, or to me have a first team career. I need to move. So I knocked on the manager's door. I said, I want to transfer. And he said, okay, put it in writing. So I put it in writing. It was accepted. And then from then on, it was a case of, moving on, if you know what I mean.
So Forest come calling. You say you played for Malcolm Allison, who sounds like a big character, but obviously you go and you speak to Brian Clough in 1976. Forest is still a second division club at that point. What was that? I said to you before we recorded, I always ask players what that first meeting was with Clough. I mean, I assume you remember it because everyone seems to. What's your recollection of meeting him?
Yeah, I've told the story loads of times. I mean, Tony Book rang me up and said, we got Brian Clough on the phone. He wants to sign you. I said, take you on loan. I said to Tony, look, Tony, I don't want to go on loan because with loan situations, you go on loan and then you go on loan for a month and then you went back to your parent club and then they'd say, no, we're not signing him. So I wanted a permanent move. So he said, okay, I'll tell Cloughy that. So I said, okay. The next phone call was Brian Clough on the phone to me. And he said, I hear you don't want to sign for me, boy. And I said, no, I don't want to sign for you, Mr. Clough. I said, it's because I want a permanent move and you're just offering me, a loan. And he said, well, put it this way. He said, you don't know me, I don't know you. Let's meet up somewhere and we can decide where we go from there. So I was living at Stockport at the time. He was living in Derby. He said, "Where do you know?" I said, "Well, okay, the only place I know is Leek." He said, "Right, meet me outside Leek Town Football Club in an hour." So I jumped in my car, got to Leek Town Football Club, and that's when we had a discussion about my future, if you like. And he just said, basically, he got out of my car, went into his car, and then we just went down the road to a pub, had a pub lunch, and basically said, "Well, you're playing in Man City's reserves. You've got a place in my first team waiting. Come along, see how you feel. After 4 weeks, I'll know whether I want to sign you or not, and you'll know whether you want to stay or not. And it's better playing in my first team than Man City's reserves." So that's what happened. I said, "Right, okay, I'll tell Man City that you agreed to come. I'll see you at the City Ground this Saturday, 12 o'clock. So I met at the City Ground, and I think my first game was Fulham that day. And the rest is history, as they say.
Does he have that aura about him back then when you meet him? Because he won the league with Derby. Obviously, he hadn't done so much with Forest. Was he the same person that he would go on to become, and this kind of folklore around him?
Yeah, I think Brian Clough would never change, no matter what he was. Whether he's player, manager, coach, whatever he's been through. His attitude to life, I don't think has ever changed. I don't think, as an individual. I just think he had something about him. No, a matter of fact, no nonsense. And then as you get to know him, it was definitely no nonsense. He said it how it was. You either liked it or you didn't like it. If you didn't like it, tough, you just got on with it. If you liked it, then you just got on with it. And it was straightforward. He wanted everything, not massively. He said, "Every time I open my mouth, I'm coaching." So when everybody said to get him on the coaching field and does things to players, yes, that does help. But when it's put in your own backyard and you've got to look after yourself very forthrightly, and you learn pretty quick that it's down to you in the end.
When you come from Man City, is there a big, huge difference between the dressing rooms in terms of culture and all? I mean, Clough seemed to inherit a team with talent, but kind of wayward young lads. So what was it like when you walked into Forest compared to Man City?
Well, the difference was all dressing rooms are the same. There was, the jokers in there, the more serious ones, the people who probably didn't like each other. So the mix was the same in any dressing room. You just had to fit in as best you can. And there were those that moaned every minute of the day, and like there are in most walks of life. So the dressing room, I never found a problem with. Whether you called the players in Man City's dressing room better than the players in Nottingham Forest dressing room, well, you've got to see where they were at the time. Man City were in the first division and Forest were in the second division, and that would be the only issue. Those are the lads at Forest thought they were good enough to play in the first division, and I'm sure in the Man City dressing room there were players who weren't in the first team who thought they were good enough to play, but they weren't, or we weren't called upon, and then you had to find your own way, and then obviously people move on from club to club, and that's how it happened, really. And I wouldn't swap it for the world, to be honest.
Where are you fitting in? Are you the joker or the moaner, or somewhere in the middle?
Well, I said it how it was. Don't get me wrong. I had a few battles with the management. I can't tell you what he called me, but I'll give it as good as I got, really. And I could joke as well. So I was quite happy where I was in the dressing room.
What about the other players then? Because obviously John Robertson goes on to be, the club's best ever player, and he's playing in front of you. Do you see immediately this guy's got it, or do you think he's the fat Scottish lad?
Well, when I first went there was a lad called Terry Curran played, and they pinned their hopes that Terry Curran would be, the star to get him out. And John Robertson was on the other side of the flank, and everything went through Terry. Everything went down Terry's side. And then Terry got injured, and then obviously it changed over. You know, our asset was the fact that we had another fella over the other side who could play, who could give us something extremely different, a bit not as dynamic as Terry could, but certainly you would get more results because Robbo could actually play all sorts of ways, and he may not have been the best tackler in the world, but he certainly put his foot in when it needed to be done. But he was certainly, when it was called upon for him to be the main man, he stood up to the plate.
So you have this month on loan. Was it kind of straightforward signing then? Was it an easy decision? Did the manager really haggle over everything?
No, that was Cloughie at his best then. He said, well, the month's over. I'm going to keep you for 3 months. And I said, no, you promised me you'd make a decision. He said, well, I'll sign you at the end of the season. So bottom line was I stayed to the end of the season. And then after the 3-month period, which was the end of the season by that time, he said, yeah, we'll sign. He said, but I'm not paying the 30,000 Man City want. He said, I'm only going to pay 29. So, he went back. And then I said to him that because I'd asked for a transfer, in those days you got 10% of your transfer fee, and he said, and if you think 10%, when I say 10%, 5% went to the benevolent fund of the league, and you got 5% in your wages. And I said, and if you ask for a transfer, you don't get that. He said, all right, just tell him you want to come off the transfer list. So I went back and said to Man City, I want to come off the transfer list. And then obviously Forest signed me, so I managed to get me 10%, which was, what was it? I don't know, $1.5 grand, but spread over 4 years. So yeah, interesting.
So which season are we at the end of now? Is this the season where you just got promoted or the season before you get promoted?
No, season before. The season before. It came into March, the season before. And then we, from then on, the first season, when it all kicked off, really, and we got out the division by the skin of our teeth. And that was, so that was that season, yeah. So,
like you say, you got out of the skin of your teeth. I think, was it like Millwall lost on the final day or something for you to go up? I mean,
well, it was Bolton and Wolves. Bolton, it was the game of Bolton. I think Bolton were playing Wolves. Had already been promoted, Wolves. And if Bolton got a result, we couldn't do anything about it. And Bolton lost. And we went up on goal difference, I think. So, crazy times, actually crazy times. And then obviously the first season in, you go and win the league, first time out. Quite interestingly, another side of the story, we never got a penny for winning the league. I don't think modern players would put up with that, but it's just the way it was. We never even thought we'd get anywhere near the league. But to go and win it and then have no financial reward for winning it, I think the club were quite happy about that. But we as individuals, we lost out.
How did you win the league? Obviously, Leicester have done it from nowhere, but I always think the Forest one was better because you newly promoted. But how did it all happen?
Well, I think everybody, when you start off, I think in a lot of divisions, you don't take it, seriously enough. And we started off and we won a few games, and then we won a few more games, and we carried on and we did well in the League Cup. And that season up to Christmas was some of the best football I played in. And we were holding our own, top of the league, or maybe second, but all of a sudden we get to the top. And basically it was after we played Manchester United away, and we beat Man United at Old Trafford. And it was famously Bob Wilson's, who was doing Match of the Day and, Football Focus or whatever it's called then. Had said, well, this is Cloughie's and Forest Waterloo. They'll get thrashed by Man United, and that'll be them finished. But we beat Man United 4-1 or 4-0, and that's when we as individuals thought, hey, we've got something here. And then from then on, from Christmas time till the end of the season, we battled like hell. The football wasn't as fluent, but we fought like hell for everything we got. And our football wasn't classic by any stretch of the imagination. When people say that it was fantastic to watch, we were battered by teams, but we managed to come through it. We managed to survive it and get results somehow. And we went on to win the league and win the league by quite a few points, really. It all fell into place. 16 lads, I don't think we have any more than 16 played through that season. And we all played different positions. So we really hung in there. And it was, we all of a sudden been league champions, and then we get into Europe, and then that's another stage of your career you go through.
Is this the first time it's really fallen into place for you then? Because you played 40 games that season. Had you had many seasons before that where you were really one of the main men, or not?
No, not really. Because I say at Man City, I played, I don't know, in one season you played 15 games on the bounce, and then you're out of the side for a bit, or you get injured, and then you come back in the side, so you're in and out. So I think if you play 30 odd games, 35 games, you think to yourself, well, you're a regular. If you're playing 20 games a season, then you're sort of, well, I'm not a regular, but I'm there or thereabouts when I need to be called on. From myself point of view, yeah, that was the longest period I had in first team football, was that season at when we won the league.
And it's a different game now, isn't it? Like if you're a fringe player, say you're the number 2 left back for Man City or whoever, you're going to play 30 games anyway, aren't you? So what was it? It must have been a challenge, or if you're one of that 4, 5, 6 guys who's always on the fringes, well, that must have been tough early in your career, mustn't it?
Well, the bottom line was, yeah, it was. You have to make a decision. You're involved at a football club, and nobody else came in for me at the time. I mean, I'm sure that if a club would have came in for me while I was at Nottingham Forest, maybe they would have sold me, but they didn't come. And then you just deal with it. And while I was in and out of the side, or while I was on the fringe, you're reasonably happy. Yes, you want to be playing every single week, but you got a chance. So there was no issue that I would ask for a transfer. And the position that Forest were in, they were in so many competitions at the time as well, that you knew you were going to get a game somewhere along the line. And as football, as a habit of, you think you're finished, and then all of a sudden you're not, you know what I mean? So that, taking all that into account, there was never, ever an issue that I was ever going to leave Forest.
Does life change overnight for you when you win the league then, in terms of, Nottingham must be absolutely buzzing at that point?
It's like, there's a saying in football, if you win football matches, it keeps everybody quiet for 7 days. And that's what obviously happened every week. And it made, I'm sure the people in Nottingham, those that supported Forest, when they went into work on Monday morning, I'm sure that they had a skip in the step. Maybe the productivity of some of these industries increased. They had a smile on their face, and then they turn up on Saturday afternoon knowing their football team were going to get the result. And the football that they were playing at the time, as I say, was pretty good. And it was, and winning hides a multitude of sins, and we won quite a lot.
What about when you do win the league at Coventry? I remember speaking to Gary Mills on here, and when you won in 1980 in Madrid, the celebrations were kind of like muted afterwards, and you come back. I mean, what's Brian Clough? How does he let you celebrate that win against that point at Coventry to win the league? Well,
we only needed a point. We had 5 games. We had 5 games remaining, and we needed a point. And obviously, for us, Coventry were up first, and we managed to get that point. We were backs to the wall in that game. And Schultz had one of those games where you could have played till the cows come home, and you'd not beat Peter Schultz that day. So we got the point. So luckily we had 4 games to go, and we could enjoy those 4 games. Going back on the bus was good, from what I can remember. Getting back into Nottingham, I think, was good. I think we went out for a drink. I can't remember all the ins and outs of it all. But yeah, it was. But we had 4 games left, and it was quite ironic, really, that because of those 4 games left, that Frank Clark, my big mate Frank, he gets his only league goal against Ipswich Town, and he came on a sub and played centre forward. So that box was ticked for him. So everything fell into place won the league, and then it was good. It was really, really good that time. And I'd say, and then you find yourself in the European Cup, and first time up, we think we were going to play here, there, and everywhere, and we end up playing Liverpool. So that was a bit of a downer. But the other side of the coin is we got through that one, and then if you get through that one, you knew that you had a great chance of progressing.
Yes, we must talk about Liverpool. Obviously, that's your most famous moment in the shirt. You get on well with Frank Clark, then, do you? Obviously, you're rivals for his position, for the same position.
Yeah, well, there was never. I never thought I'd ever take Frank's place. Don't get me wrong. It was the situation. Frank got himself injured on that in the Championship winning year, and I jumped in at left back. And luckily for me, I kept Frank out for a while, and then I became the regular, if you like. And then when somebody got injured, I would move across. Say Viv got injured, I would move across to right back, and then Frank would come in. Say one of the centre halves got injured, I'd play at centre half occasionally, and then Frank would come in. So Frank had that season had a fair few games, more than a. So he was like going back the fringe player, but I think he may have got 12, 20 games in, something like that season, as well. So we all mixed in together. But when anybody got injured on the back line, it was always me that moved. Nobody came in. It was Frank didn't go and play right back. I was the one that played, and Frank came in and played left back. Or I went to centre half, and Frank would come in then. So they never messed around too much.
You mentioned Shilton there. Obviously, he makes such a difference as such a high quality player. What's he like in the dressing room? Because these days it seems like you've got a tight knit bunch of miracle men, and he doesn't seem to be quite as involved day to day. Was he a bit distant back then, or not?
Well, Schultz was bottom line. Schultz was Schultz. He came in and he went out just as quick as he came in. Eventually, he moved into the area, and then he became more involved in one or two of the things. But more often than not, Peter kept himself to himself. But he joined him when we had the big do's. But yeah, he was. I suppose you could say he was a little bit distant, but not enough to cause any problems.
So you mentioned Liverpool, that draw, and you think, we're going out, what a nightmare. And then you beat Liverpool 2-0 in the first leg in September 78. That Liverpool team's just like ridiculous. I looked at it the other day. Everyone's a household name and a club legend. And then you go and get the second goal yourself with like 3 minutes to go. I suppose you'll dine out on this till the day you're no longer with us. But just tell us about it again.
Well, obviously we drew Liverpool, and then obviously we have to get over this massive hurdle first off. Gary gets the first goal, which settles us down, and it was back to the wall. We had a few chances ourselves after that, and then as the game goes on, we're getting closer to the end. And I was brought up on football. You follow the ball as much and you help out as much as you can. And we had an opportunity, and I went forward. Possibly shouldn't have done in the last couple of minutes of a football match, but I didn't care basically because the momentum was with me. And Burles crosses it, Woodcock nods it down, and I smack it in the back of the net, and the rest is history. And going up to Anfield, you're better with 2-0 than 1-0. But the lads did brilliantly at Anfield and got the result that was needed. 0-0, it was fantastic. But I was in a hospital bed then, so that was the start of the end of my career. I mean, we'll talk about that obviously. Do you still see that goal crystal clear in your mind's eye today then, or is it all a bit of a blur? Yeah. I've got a picture on my wall here, so that reminds me every morning when I'm having my breakfast. Basically, it's in black and white, but it'll do.
What did the gaffer and the other lads say to you then, if you're not really meant to be up there scoring that goal?
Well, look, apparently the story goes, Martin O'Neill tells the story in the dugout that Clough is going mad. He's going absolutely mad. He said, "Where's he going? What's he doing?" And he's screaming at me to get back, to get back. And Peter Taylor's screaming, "Get back, you idiot," or words to that effect. And then all of a sudden I put it in the back of the net, and both of them stood up. What a great goal! That, luckily for me, if I hadn't put it in the back of the net, I definitely would have been fined, because I remember Kenny Burns getting fined for making a bad pass. So he got fined 25 quid for making a bad pass. God knows what I'd have been fined if Liverpool had gone down and scored while I was up the park. So I probably wouldn't have played again for Forest, I have to say.
So not long after that, like literally days after that, as you say, you have this terrible knee injury that probably ultimately leads to the end of your career. Yeah. When it happens back then, obviously different medical technology, do you know at the time that it's that's probably it for you, or do you think actually I'll just be a few weeks here?
Well, when I first got tackled, John Mahoney came across me. He was playing for Middlesbrough at the time, and he came across my knee, and I just went down. I thought, there's something wrong here, and I couldn't get up. And then under Cloughie's rules, he don't like anybody injured, so I tried to get up and I tried to walk, and then I thought, I'm okay, I'll run this off. And then somebody played me a ball, and I went from my right foot to my left foot, and I fell over. So I knew something was drastically wrong then. And then I got carried off, and then I was put in the hospital that night. And then they operated on maybe the Tuesday, Wednesday of the following week, and then I was 6 weeks in plaster. They told me what I'd done. They said, you've done your medial ligaments, and they're all shattered, they're all snapped and that. So they stitched them together, and after 6 weeks I came out of that, and then the long rehabilitation took. And then in the meantime, I played a few games, but the knee kept giving way. And then in the end, it was just a case of you wanted to carry on playing, but the knee was unstable. So we just carried on till somebody said, no, you can't play anymore. But nobody ever said that to me, But I carried on, went and moved out of Forest, went to Swindon for a year. And then the knee kept giving way, and then they said, no, we're letting you go. And then it was a case of nobody wanted me, so I just basically retired then, really.
Are you in and around the European Cup stuff then? You're still at Forest? I mean,
yeah.
Are you able to feel part of it at all?
Well, I played, even though my knee had gone, I played in the semi-finals against Cologne. I played in the Grasshoppers away tie. It was after the first leg of Cologne that I played in Manchester. I think it was Manchester United, and my knee went again, just before then, and that's when I went to hospital again. And the surgeon said, "I think you better leave it this season. You're not going to be playing again this season." And that's when I realised I missed the European Cup final. I played in the League Cup final against Southampton after recovering from injury, but again, it wasn't stable, the knee. So yeah, I mean, and then the following season, I had a year left of my contract, and then that was the second European Cup year, and I was with the club, just playing in reserve team football and playing whatever games I could. Didn't play in the first team, and then at the end of that time, they just said, "We're not renewing your contract, and that you're on a free," and that's when I went to Swindon for a year.
I take it you've got at least one medal then in your cabinet for the 79 final.
Not an original. I never got an original medal, and that was the sore point. But what Brian Clough did do, he got some replicas made from a jeweller's in Derby, and I got one of those. But that was it. They never applied to UEFA, and never went back to UEFA. And I mean, there's a story which is probably the biggest disappointment in my footballing career, really, and the story. At the end of the Malmo game, in the dressing room, the dressing room was a bit down because we didn't play the style of football we wanted to play, but we won the European Cup, which is crazy to think that everybody was down. And then Brian Clough said, "I want all the medals on the table," but the lads didn't want to do that. So he said, "All those lads that played, keep your medals, but I want the 5 that didn't play." So the 5 subs gave their medals on, and then eventually he dished them out, afterwards. I do know for a fact a couple of them didn't get the original ones, and I didn't get, I didn't get a medal, and old Millsy didn't get a medal, because he played in one of the rounds, and he thought he was entitled to a medal, which he was, like we all were. But the club never chased any extra medals up. So I do know that in those days, they only ever had 16 medals. It's not like the rest like it is now, where you get 47 medals and your groundsman gets a medal now. In those days, they just had 16 medals, and those 16 medals were should have been taken up by the 16 players that were representing Forest that day. But it'd be interesting to see where the other medals went. There was definitely a few medals went missing.
What kind of support do you get as an injured player back then? Because these days, you got the PFA and massive medical technology and everything, and psychological counselling. Do Forest and Clough look after you, or are you left to your own devices when you struggle?
You're left to your own devices, really. I mean, Clough, basically, he'd done all he could medically for me. That's what they thought, and I'd had a few operations. The PFA, I never rang the PFA up. I never asked about anything from them, and I never have. I rang the PFA once for advice, and it wasn't very helpful. But it's a big organisation, the PFA. It's a wealthy organisation, and was never in any benevolent fund in terms of medical insurance. I never had anything like that. I never had anything, financial. So when I finished playing at 29, and my footballing career was on that, you like everybody else, when you lose your job, you've got to go find another job, and that's what happened. We were living in Swindon at the time, and we made a decision that we would come back to Nottingham because that's where the good times were, and we'd try and eke out livings that way. So when I came back, I worked in a pub. A local guy said, "Yeah, come and work in a pub." So I did that. Made snooker tables, and a lad called Ron Hume, who made snooker tables, because snooker was the craze at the time, and he was making snooker tables. And Ron said, "Come and work for me," not knowing anything about them. So basically, I was labouring, cutting up wood for the cushions of the snooker table. They were then assembling them, and I was with him for a year, and then working in the pub at the same time. Everything to try and get some money on the table, My wife was a school teacher at the time, so we had a young family. So we just scraped it together, worked as best we could, and we survived, basically, as you do. But you cut your cloth accordingly, and we managed to come through it okay.
Are you angry or bitter? I mean, you just won the league. I don't want to bring back this day all the time, but if you would play one season in the Premier League, you're set for life. And here's, Colin Barrett pulling pints for Forest fans, I guess, at one point, and then making snooker tables. I mean, how are you feeling inside about that? I suppose you must be a bit angry, mustn't you?
The bottom line is, my day was my day,
Yeah.
And you have to accept the fact that in your day, these were what was on offer, and it was a short career. Obviously, I wanted to last a bit longer than it did, but the issue was you knew what you were getting into, and it was your decisions to make all these, the right decisions. And it was up to you then. So no, I don't regret any of it. Not one bit do I regret it. And I just think we've survived. We've come through it all right, as a family. And the finances side, good luck to these guys. Now I think it's gone crazy, but good luck to them. It's not their fault. When somebody wants to pay them that amount of money. But it is, there is a difference today, and I don't begrudge him. Some lads say, "Well, I wish I'd had a year now." Well, yeah, but you'll never forget the memories you've had.
Yeah, which kind of leads on to what I always ask players. I mean, would you have traded a steady career in the first division till you were like 32, 33 with Forest or whoever? Or the candle that burns bright for a bit shorter, like you had, and you've done things that so few people have done in football, haven't you?
Well, it's like anything. I just said to you, Matt. You've got to take it when you're there. You take anything and everything, and you know it's only a short time, and you want to. You think you can go on forever. You do, honestly. You think you can play football forever. But I would not swap mine for one bit. That 5 years at Forest, even in the few years, the 4 or 5 years I had at Man City, I helped them get to two League Cup finals. And even that, I would not trade for the world. I ended up being a painter and decorator, and the only reason I ended up painting and decorating because I was painting my house, and somebody said, "Well, my house needs painting badly," so I said I can do that. So I painted next door neighbour's house outside, and then it carried on from there. But I finished painting and decorating, and we did okay. We did all right.
Did you never want to get back in, maybe at non-league, a bit of coaching or anything like that, or did football not appeal?
You do think there'll be an avenue back in somehow. I did a bit locally at amateur level with the local amateur side, got them to a county cup final. But other than that, it's like any business, Matt. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And then when I'm 29 and I'm finishing in the game, I didn't know many people with jobs that knew me. So it was difficult. And as I say, even now, if you look about all these managers, they'll always take the mates with them. They'll always take the powers that be with them, their friends or the people they can rely on. And that never changes.
What about more recently? I suppose, like we said, I believe in miracles kind of brings your achievements back to the fore, doesn't it? Is it a new generation of Forest fan kind of appreciate what you've done and maybe walk up to you in the street every now and then and say, "Oh, you're Colin Barrett"? Well,
that happens every now and again. Every now and again that happens. But and they mention the film, and obviously it's brought it to the forefront of everybody. But you've got to also remember that you shouldn't forget your history. You shouldn't forget your history of football club. But you hope your football club progresses, and all the lads today, all the young ones today, they're more interested in the here and now. This is their football team now. What I will say is that what we achieved back then was the basis or the base of the fans of today. The fathers who were kids then, who grew up being Forest fans then, brought their children up to be Forest fans. I mean, when I first came to this football club, the average gate was 12,000, in the second division, and which was a good sized club. It was no problem. Even when we went into the first division, I think I was up to 18, 19, 20,000. It was only once we started getting success that it was down to 30 odd that thousand. And then if you say you go down into the second division as now, if you can imagine that time when we had it, there was 12,000 at City Ground. And the City Ground nowadays, there's 28,000, 30,000. And that's a massive difference, huge difference. So, yes, I think what we achieved then was your history, the base of your fan base going forward. But all the lads they want to have their taste of success. They want to have their trip to Wembley. The generation that grew up with us, they had trip after trip to Wembley, and they loved it. They thought it was an annual event, but it never is. But what everybody wants now is to get in the Premier League. I want Forest to be in the Premier League. It is but it's the hardest thing to do is get out of this championship. And I just think it's the fans of today, they want their bit, so they're not too worried about what happened in the past. It's there. They all refer to the 2 stars on the shirt, but they're more interested in the modern day player now.
Forest to your club, then I take it. You're still round here, or you started Man City, but do you always think of Forest as your club now?
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, because of what it's given me, Matt. It employed me for one. It gave me an opportunity. And I'll be forever grateful. And I mean, I guarantee you, Clough and Taylor never thought they would have the success they had in a million years, and not with that bunch of players that they had. They didn't even give you. They might have said, "Well, we might survive, we might get out with the skin of our teeth," but no way would they have thought that they would win the trophies that they won.
What kind of bond is there between you now then? Because obviously guys like Martin O'Neill have got loads of media work or management
whenever we get
work.
together, we're all like the dressing room, the joking starts, the fun, the Mickey taking out of each other starts, and everything is like normal, if you like any normal workforce. So yeah, everything's good. Everything's good, you know. And obviously Martin's done his thing in the footballing world, so he's had success that way. You know, we don't call each other up every day, but one of the things is that when we all get together, we're a bond, and that bond, even if we don't see each other for a couple of years, it will still be there.
True. Are Forest going up this season? Is it even possible?
The possibility is they've given themselves an opportunity now, because if you think about it, they're only 8 points off the playoffs, right? And if you say to somebody, you're 8 points off the playoffs at Christmas, you've got to be thinking you have an opportunity. The situation they've got themselves in, as much as we like to praise the players when they do well, the players have got to take an awful lot of responsibility for those first 10 games of the season. You know, if they can justify when they look in the mirror in the morning and say, well, I put my lot in that time, then I would question that. They've had a few good results now, and hopefully the honeymoon period will carry on. And then all of a sudden it becomes the hard work's got to start, and you've got to fight for every single point that comes along. But they've given themselves an opportunity now that come Christmas time, if they get up to 4 or 5 points behind playoffs, I think they're in with a shout. And then it's a case of, this is from a recruitment point of view, that's the issue then. What do you do then? Forest have signed 60 players over the last 3 years, maybe even more, and they've not progressed. And then you've got to say to yourself, you've got to question the recruitment, and hopefully somewhere in that football club, someone will suss this out and say, we've got to get the recruitment right this time.
Where's the balance between success and failure lie then? Because you can't, like you say about players can let the manager down, and managers can make a huge difference. Recruitment all comes in. I mean, does it all have to work as one, or does it just come down?
Well, it's a combination, isn't it? It's basic teamwork. The manager can only put the team out that he thinks he's going to win a football match. When you cross a white line and you're playing for your football club, you've got to make sure that you're going to do the best you can to get that result. When you're on a football pitch and your mate's in trouble, you want to make the angle for that mate, you know, for him to give you the football, to get him out of trouble, to back him up when they're in trouble, you know, to be there when it's needed. And sometimes when things aren't going for you, not intentionally, you're not there. You just concentrate on your own things, and you never go that extra yard for your mate, or for, you know, to stop a cross coming in, to make a tackle, to make a run, to make an angle for a pass. And you just think, no, I'm okay here. So you play safely. But when things start to go well, which is happening in the last couple of games, all of a sudden you've got an extra spring in your step. You move that extra yard quicker. You make yourself available, and then it becomes easier. And that's the difference between. I'll put it another way. At the start of the season, the young boy Johnson, Brendan, he goes down the line again. I think it's against the middle. He puts 3 crosses over. I guarantee you, every centre forward in the world would have said thank you. Bang, bang, bang. They'd have got goals. Nobody was there. The boy Mighton puts a crossover against Barnsley, and he drives the crossover. All of a sudden, the centre forward's there, bang, it's in the back of the net. And that's the difference. People think the difference between, well, I was there, I was in the vicinity, but I couldn't get to the ball on time. And the difference between I'm there and I'm going to get to the ball on time, that's the split seconds that you need to success and failure. If you don't understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the issues that have been going on these last 7 or 8 games is players are thinking they're putting a lot in, or thinking they make they're doing enough, when in all honesty they've just been lacking that little bit of urgency, that little bit of desire to get that extra step. And it's come these last couple of games because they're winning football matches. And once you start winning football matches, the world opens up. And I said to you earlier on, it shuts everybody up for 7 days. And I still believe football is 7 days old. That's all it is, 7 days. Because as soon as that 7 days is done, another game comes around, you win it, then everybody forgets the last 7 days. Everybody's forgotten the last 10 games. And this is now where, unfortunately, from Forest's point of view, they had that international break, you just hope they come out all guns blazing against Blackpool and get the result, and then that gets the momentum going again.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I'm as guilty as any fan of the 7-day, the result cycle. You're not wrong there. Right. We'll leave it there. Thanks very much, Colin. I really appreciate that, and hopefully people enjoyed it and give us a good rating. Colin, you'd be very welcome to come back on again and do some punditry if you're so interested.
Yeah. Well, just give us a call, Matt. You know where I am. You've got my phone number now. So
I have.
Only happy to help, mate. No problem.
Excellent. Thanks very much, and we shall be back after the Blackpool game. And
thank you for listening to Garibaldi Red, a Nottingham Forest podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please let us know. We love hearing your feedback. We'll be back soon with another episode. Thanks for listening.